college town, and Berkeley is the place.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our monthly speaker series, where our neighbors share their life story with us. It's my pleasure to introduce Bob Schriger. A little background on Bob. He was born and raised in the New York City area. He graduated from Fordham University College of Pharmacy in 1957. He owned 2 pharmacies in New Rochelle and Mamaroneck, New York, both suburbs of New York City. Bob is a man of many talents. He plays the clarinet and has performed with the Hudson Valley Wind Symphony, as well as the Hilton Head Orchestra. Bob was also a ballroom dance instructor at the Fred Astaire Studios. But Bob's claim to fame was selling drugs.
That's where the money was.
His presentation today is titled, How I Made It to TidePointe Selling Drugs. Let's welcome Bob Schriger.
Thanks for coming, everybody. I had to check my address book because I didn't know if I'm giving a speech today or we're playing bingo. But I can see by the way the chairs are arranged what to do now. Anyway, I'm like to be called Bob, but my first name really is Philip Robert, and that's why I'm Bob. But I'm also known as Mr. Ketchup because I absorb more ketchup here than everybody combined. They had a double list of purchases of ketchup to satisfy my ketchup needs. I'm known as the Clarinet Man. I'm known as Cat Man because I take care of the stray cats here. And I'm also known as Mr. Bingo. And I wanted to let you know that last Thursday was my wife and I's 65th wedding anniversary. Judy and my son Todd, please stand. Let everybody see you.
I'm just going to move this up a little bit closer. There. You got to talk right into it.
Oh, okay.
All right.
We met at her Sweet 16. That was a long time ago. All right, now let's get down. I attended Fordham University College of Pharmacy, and the first day that we met with the dean in the lecture hall, he said, there are 200 men here and 3 women. He said, I want you to know, in the junior year, we have room for only 100 students. So look around, because half of you won't be here. And he said, if you want to let your neighbor copy on a test, go right ahead. All you're doing is increasing your chances of being the one who's not going to be here anymore. The problem with the 3 women, they were all nuns. And they were studying pharmacy to work in Catholic hospitals as pharmacists. The problem is they ruined the curve because the men would go to pharmacies after school to get their apprenticeship. The nuns went back to the convent and studied. So the highest mark on a test, if the men would get 70, the nun would come in with 98, 99, and 100. And that's the way it was. Well, my first year as an apprenticeship was very interesting because if the women can remember, when you went to the drugstore and you had to buy sanitary napkins, it was always embarrassing, to carry that package around because in big letters it said Kotex or Modes. So my job was to wrap the packages in green paper, folded just properly, and disguise it. But I would mark it, if it was Modes Super, I'd mark it MS, Kotex regular was KR. So everybody, like, nobody knew what was happening. But the second year I advanced, and I went to work in Times Square at one of the chain drugstores. And my first job was anybody who came into the store on a sunny day and carried an umbrella, my job was to follow them around. Because what they did is they would take merchandise and throw it into the umbrella and then walk out of the store. So I had to stop them at the door, tell them, it looks like it might start raining, and open up the umbrella, and all the merchandise would fall out. And at the end of the year, we had a lot of umbrellas because the people took off, without the umbrella. The second year, I got a promotion to the cosmetic department. And as you know, Times Square has a large area with a lot of hookers and prostitutes. It's very common in that, So we had a couple of special ideas, not that I thought of, but what we would do is we would have on the shelf a bottle of Arpege perfume, a bottle of Chanel perfume, a bottle of My Sin, pardon the pun, and the hookers would come in with their escort, and the prostitute would say, could you buy me that bottle of Arpege perfume? I love Arpege. And the escort, trying to please her, would say, okay. And then they would take off to a secret rendezvous, which was not too far away. And an hour later, the hooker would come back with the perfume, and I would put it on the shelf. Now, the escort paid $75, and I put it back on the shelf and give her $20. And we had some very active hookers. And what would happen, we had one woman, and she came back like 12 times a night with the same bottle. And she made like $250. We made $500. But that bottle, kept on leaving, coming back. When at Fordham, I played in the band, and I played in the band at high school, and I've been playing for 70 years. And being a Jesuit college, we played all our home games at the Polo Grounds in New York. And when we went, and football games, when we went out, we would play at Georgetown, Holy Cross, Boston College. But it was good, and we really enjoyed it. And at being a Jesuit college, before each class and after each class, you said a Hail Mary. Being Jewish, you didn't have to say it, but all those years, you got to know it just as well as the Catholic boys. And to this day, I still know Hail Mary, We don't use it much in temple, but it's there. I played with the Hudson Valley Wind Symphony, which was a semi-professional group in White Plains, New York, and we played a lot of concerts in the New York area. Now, after graduation, you had to decide what do you want to do. If you want to continue your education and get to the PhD level, you could. And today, all pharmacists who graduate, and it's a 6-year course, are given doctorate degrees. That's automatically. But if you didn't pursue your studies, you went into detailing, and in those days, all the detail people would represent the pharmaceutical companies, and they'd make calls on doctors, and that was your job, to introduce new drugs to the doctors. Or you might decide to go into hospital pharmacy, which some people did, or the majority went into retailing, and you worked in a retail pharmacy. And we were graduate pharmacists, but we weren't licensed pharmacists. And I remember after graduation, everybody said, which state is going to give the state board first? Because I want to be a licensed graduate pharmacist. And the first state that came up was Maine. So we all piled into the car, we rode up to Augusta, took the test, And if within a week we had our license. Now we are licensed registered pharmacists. But you had to make decisions which state that you want to take the test in, because when you graduate, your knowledge is vast, but over the years, all you remember is your empirical knowledge. You forget all the pharmacology, the organic chemistry. So you're really at age 22 making decisions that are going to affect you when you're 60 and 70 years old. So the first state that I picked was Georgia. And I was told, when you go before the review board, the last thing you want to say is you want to practice in Atlanta, because they had more pharmacists in the Atlanta area. So and they asked that question, and you would have to say Dalton, Macon, Albany. You didn't say Albany. Albany, Georgia, Ludowici, and took the test, and 3-4 days the license was there. Next state was South Carolina, and that was a problem, because they sent you a book of 1,200 pages to study what was going to be, the exam was going to be in the book. And mainly it was pharmacognosy. And pharmacognosy is drugs that are made from plant origin, like belladonna, would be one, digitalis, and was boring, but you studied. And I got to Columbia to take the exam, and I remember seeing students from the local pharmacy from South Carolina school who were there, and they had a book with 12 pages, a pamphlet. And I said, "What exam are you taking?" And they said, "I'm taking the same exam you are taking." I said, "But I got 1,200 pages, and you got 12. They said, "Well, the test is from my book, not yours." Well, went into the exam, and usually I'm one of the first out. I was the last one out. And I remember the first thing I did, I took that 1,200-page book, and the closest garbage can I could find, I threw it in, went downstairs, got in the cab, went to the airport, and said, "Get me out of this state." 5 days later, the license comes in the mail. So I'm licensed now in South Carolina. I wanted to give you a few examples of advice that I gave to my children. And I have 2 boys and a girl in the middle. Well, the girl went off to college in Boston, and I gave her a car. I said, "What I want you to do is, when you get to Boston, go to a filling station, introduce yourself, who you are, tell the person you're going to buy your gas regularly there, so if you have the problem with a car, they're not going to try and rip you off, and they'll treat you right," which I thought was good advice. Well, I called her about 3 days later. No, it was like 3 weeks later. And I said, "How's it coming with my advice?" She said, "Dad, I introduced myself to the owner, and his son happened to be in the station there, and he asked me out on a date, and we've been going out now for like 3 weeks." And she says, "I did better than you asked. I don't even pay for gas." The bottom line is, they've been married 35 years. They're ski enthusiasts, and recently they moved to Montana, because there they measure snow by the foot. In Vermont, where they had moved, it was just in the inches. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry you got so much snow. They got 3 feet." She says, "We were hoping for 6 feet." But we went to visit them last year, and we went in October, because I did want to get in the cold winter. And unfortunately, it was a cold spell, and it was minus 15 degrees. We even went to a graduation of one of my grandchildren in May, and they had to bring it inside because they had a snow in May. So there's a very short period, but they love it because they can ski a couple of hundred times a year, and they do that. Now it comes to my son Todd, who's sitting here, and he went to school outside of Chicago. And he went to Lake Forest College, which is near the border of Wisconsin. And after a few weeks, I called his room, and he wasn't there, and I spoke to his roommate, and I said, "Where's Todd?" And he said he went to see Bruce Springsteen. Dumb me, not knowing who Bruce Springsteen was, I said to him, to his roommate, I said, "Well, what room is Bruce in? I'll call him there." They're still talking about that, you know. Well, after getting licensed in New York, finally that test came up. My first job was in Fresh Meadow Pharmacy, and that was in Queens, Long Island, on the Long Island Expressway, which has the reputation for being the longest parking lot in the world, because on weekends, everybody goes out to the Hamptons, they go out to Montauk, so traffic is bumper to bumper. And let me tell you a few of the episodes that happened there. In those days, not like today, when you want a pregnancy test, now you just go into the drugstore, you buy a kit, and in a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, you have the results. Those days, you had to mail the specimen away, and we mailed our specimens away to a laboratory in Chicago. But we wanted to get the results faster because everybody's anxious for results. So we had a program where the person from the laboratory would call and ask for person to Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Jones. If they asked person to person for Mrs. Smith, that meant the test was positive. But of course, nobody would answer the call. That person wasn't there. If they asked for Mrs. Jones, that means it was negative. Well, this went on for a couple of years, and all of a sudden we got a visit from the telephone company. And he said, "I have a list of 250 person-to-person calls made to this telephone number, and not one of them has been accepted. What's going on?" And I remember my boss thought fast, and he said, "I don't know what's happening, but it'll never happen again." And luckily, we got no charges were pressed, and we got away with one. A lot of the doctors had in the office in the area would have samples given to them by the detail men, and they had rooms full of samples, and they would call the pharmacy, "Please come here, send a man, pick up all these drug samples, just clear the room, I don't have space." So we would do that, and we would use the medications for indigent people or people who had problems who couldn't afford it, even though the average prescription in those days was $5 a prescription. But it's still, a lot of the samples had printed on the capsule or tablet the word sample, do not sell. And somehow a batch of one antibiotic we didn't put it into a different room, it got into the main bottle with the antibiotics that we had. And we dispensed it. And the woman called up and she said, "I got my prescription, but it says on it, sample, do not sell." And I thought fast. I said, "Exactly." I said, "It's a very potent drug." I said, "And under no circumstances are you to sell it or are you to give it to anybody else." Well, she bought the story, so we were off the hook again. In those days, there were a lot of robberies in drugstores, and in those days, more pharmacists were killed than policemen because they would come in, rob you, and steal your drugs, steal your money. Today it's a little different. But one night I was working the shift alone, and two crooks came in, and they each had a .45, and they put it to my head, and they said, "We want your money, and we want all the drugs, and we want it fast." And I said, "I'll give you whatever you want, just leave me alone." And one of the crooks said, "I don't like your face, I'm going to kill you." And the other one said, "No, he's cooperating, just get the stuff, let's get out of here." Well, I thought after they left, I said, well, he was just trying to scare me. But I wasn't sure, and what I did, anybody who came in the store for the next 6 months or so, if I didn't recognize them and they put their hand in their pocket to take out their wallet or into their purse, I thought a gun is coming out instead of money. So it was a scary thing. But a few months later, they found one of the crooks, and he was in Flushing, which is a town pretty close there. And one of the detectives went in through the front door, and the other detective went up the fire escape and came in through the window. And he saw them, and the first thing the crook did is he grabbed his baby, a 1-year-old baby, and he held the baby up and he said, "Don't shoot, I got a baby." Well, the detectives lowered their weapons. First thing he did is pull a gun, shot both cops. Then I realized what a nut this guy was, and he would have blown my brains out, and how lucky I was. The irony of the story is, a week before the trial, his mother came into the drugstore, and she's not supposed to be there. We're having a trial. I'm a witness. And she says, "My boy wouldn't do anything. He's a good boy." And I said to her, anybody who puts a gun to my head and threatens to blow my brains out, I'm not going to forget what they look like. And believe me, it was your son. And I said, your son was so high and committed so many robberies, he doesn't even remember. But believe me, he's guilty. Well, they gave him the book, and they gave him 35 years in prison with no chance of parole. Because, you know, when you threaten a cop, then beside me, he was put away for a long time. Let me just take a drink for a second. After a number of years working the drugstore, maybe 5 or 6, you decide it's time to buy your own pharmacy. And I wanted to be out of the city. I wanted to get it away. And I was looking upstate New York. And I remembered a classmate of mine who came from upstate. He came from Kingston area. And I called him, and he said, yeah. I said, I'd like to go into business too. So the two of us scouted the state, and we went to Binghamton, Buffalo, Syracuse, Albany, Lake George, and we couldn't find anything. But then a store came up in New Rochelle, and this particular store had some famous people. And see if you can guess this one. An artist, and his initials are NR. Anybody recognize that? Exactly. And he was a customer of the store. And he was very friendly with one of the pharmacists who had owned the store and had given him several originals, which he kept for years. By the time we got there, Norman Rockwell had moved to Massachusetts, but he was one of the famous people who was there. Well, my partner and I, the first day, we came to a conclusion. We made a marriage which should have happened. He was the biggest procrastinator in the world. And unfortunately, I was just the opposite. I am compulsive. And to this day, I'm even worse now, you know. So it's like trying to mix oil and water, and you can't mix them. In pharmacy, you can mix them. You can make an emulsion. But normally, you know, in our relationship, we couldn't do that. So I said, the only way this is going to work is if we make some ground rules. And the first ground rule was never to work together. So it meant that he worked Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I worked Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And it was working out, and for 10 years. And also another ground rule was any work that you had on your day, if you had to stay to 2 o'clock in the morning and finish it, you must finish it, because the next day, the next person has to start at 0, not to do yesterday's work. And he said, I can't argue with that. And we proceeded under those rules, and it seemed to work out. But because we did that, we turned a negative into a positive. And one of the ways that we did it is by, let me put it like this. we each never had a problem with conflicts because one was working, the other was off. So we said, why don't we buy a boat? I said, because generally the problem in partnerships in boats is because both people want it on a sunny day. We would never run into that problem because when one person was using the boat, the other person was off, you know. So the only rule was that after you finished with the boat, you tapped off the tanks, and it worked out well. Until my partner came up with the idea, and he said, my son, he would like to use the boat, but I understand that he should only use the boat on on his day, not on my day. He said, but I want it to be fair. He said, my son lives in the area here. He said, you should have your son also be able to use the boat. The only problem is my son Todd lives in San Francisco, and the boat is here on Long Island Sound, so it wasn't such a great deal. Another problem we had is my partner was working Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I was working Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And after a number of years, I decided, we're closed on Sunday, so my partner is off every weekend, and I'm working every weekend, So I told him, we got to change this. For the next 10 years, I'm gonna work Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. He said, no. He said, we'll have 1 week you work on, the next week you change, so it just varies. And that's what we decided to do. And this was after a number of years, and it was and pharmacy. It was getting to be where you're getting to the point where it was getting to be boring, And I told my wife, this is real. I said to her one night, I'm going to go to a pharmaceutical meeting for the next 3 weeks, and I won't be home 2 nights a week. But my partner and I have to attend these meetings, and it's part of maintaining licensure. And she said, I understand. But and I went, but what I didn't tell her, the real reason I took off is because when we were going to weddings and bar mitzvahs and social engagements, she always wanted to dance. And I didn't dance well, and if I didn't do anything well, I didn't want to do it. So what I was doing is I was going to Fred Astaire and taking private lessons. The problem happened after 3 or 4 weeks. My partner called the house one night, and he said, let me speak to Bob. And Judy said, aren't you at the meeting with Bob? And he said, what meeting? Well, when I came home that night, she was crying and crying. Luckily, I had a good excuse. I told her where I was, and she accepted it. And I kept on going for lessons. And after a while, I said to her, you got to go for lessons. And she started going for lessons also. No, right on schedule. I tried to time it, and this is supposed to last 59 minutes. And I was going to bring the clarinet in case I was short in time. But well, anyway, after a number of years taking dance lessons, they said to me, you're getting to be pretty good. How'd you like to come here and work? And I was thinking, maybe it's a good idea because work in the pharmacy, it's getting boring, after a while. And we're charging $5 for a prescription. In the dance studio, we're charging $75 an hour, and the people are happy to pay the $75. We had one woman who was an OBGYN doctor, and she was taking 30 hours of class a week at $75 an hour, which meant she was paying over $2,000 a week for lessons. And I said to her, why are you doing this? And she said, well, I'll tell you why. She said, if I wasn't coming here and taking the lessons, I'd be going to psychiatrists and paying them the money, and I'm enjoying this, and that's why I'm doing it. And she got to be very good. She won a lot of competitions, and I was teaching, but I was a new guy on the team. And unfortunately, for the first 3 years, and I had to wear a jacket and a tie and push somebody around for 3 hours, and I never got anybody who was less than 300 pounds. And you push 300 pounds around, all night long. It's not easy. And then you would have a party, and at the party, your students were there. And God forbid you would dance 3 dances with one of your students and only 2 dances with another student. They'd let you know quickly. But we entered a lot of competitions and all the Fred Astaire studios up and down the East Coast. And I remember one competition. It was a bossa nova competition, and there were 50 couples, and we came in second out of 50. And I thought it was pretty good. And I said, you did very well in the competition. And her answer was, and I'll never forget, there is no substitute for number 1. She was not satisfied with second. I remember once I gave at one of these competitions a tango exhibition. And there I was in the tango position, smiling, going around the floor. And at the end of the dance, this man came up to me and he said, I think I was your orthodontist when you were a teenager. He said, I just remember those teeth. He said, my name is Dr. Resnick. And I said, Dr. Resnick, you're right. It's been 25 years, but you got the teeth right. Well, we had some, like I said, Norman Rockwell, who was a customer of the store. You remember Teresa Brewer? She was a customer. Paul Stuckey of Peter, Paul and Mary, he was a customer. Remember Joan London, Good Morning America? She was a customer. So we had some really good customers. But let me tell you about some of the stories that happened at the store. We would deliver anything, and we didn't want to say no. We wanted to say yes, and we had competition from chain stores, but they really weren't competition because they weren't willing to say yes all the time. They took the easy way out. But unfortunately, because of insurance problems and everything today, that they've closed most of these independent stores. And White Plains, which was one of the big cities close by, had 30 independent pharmacies, and it ended up with 1. It's like this on Hilton Head Island. We got Burke's, but there are no other independent stores because insurance companies had made deals, with all the chains. And I remember the final nail in the coffin for us is when I tried to fill a prescription in my own store for myself, and the insurance company sent me a letter, we can't pay for that. You have to go order it online, or you have to go to CVS to fill it. I mean, that was the final nail in the coffin. But in our store, people would call, we had a fountain in one of the stores, and people would call up and ask for delivery of an ice cream soda, and we would send it. I would pay the driver $1.25 to deliver a 75-cent ice cream soda. And then we had our own delivery car at the time, and a driver came in because he needed a job and we needed a driver. And I gave him 10 deliveries, and I gave him a map, and I said, take these out and come back when you finish. And about 10 minutes later, he shows up. And I said, you made 10 deliveries already? He said, no, I went in the car and I look and there's a third pedal on the floor. He said, I don't understand, what's that pedal? It was the clutch, And I said, well, that's to rest your left foot if it gets tired. I said, but maybe you shouldn't have this job until you learn to drive, because I didn't want him learning and burning out my clutch. One of the experience that I have that I remember, and really a hard experience, is we started leasing cars, and it was time for our car to be serviced, and the person who leased the car said, I don't have another car available. What I'm going to do is I'll give you a brand new car, just be careful. Well, sure enough, the driver totaled the car. And I had to call up the car dealer and say what happened. The car dealer was pretty nice. He said, we're covered for this. He says, things happen, accidents happen. I said, but I still need a car. And yours, he said, well, it's not ready yet. He said, I'll give you another car, another brand new car. He said, just be careful. Well, the driver wrecked that car also, totaled it. 2 brand new cars totaled. And that was one of the most difficult phone calls I ever had make, calling up this dealer and saying, the second car has been totaled also. Just imagine. He didn't say much, but he wasn't very happy. Now, I can mention some names of some customers because it doesn't mean anything to you. And these were older customers, and it's 40, 50 years ago, so they're not around to object or sue me for using the name. Now, we had a customer named Mrs. Stern. And in those days, it was before computers, and Mrs. Stern was big in the stock market. And she lived in an area that we serviced. It was called Waikiki in New Rochelle, and there were lots of mansions, big homes. And she was one person, lived in a 30-room mansion. But she wanted to know the closing prices of the stocks for the day. And there was no computer or anything. So what she said, can you send me the New York Times, the 5 p.m. edition, which was the last edition of the Post, unless it was the Post, New York Post, and we would send it to her, and she would get the final prices for the day. And after maybe 6 months, because I was paying a driver $1.25 to deliver a 10-cent newspaper, you don't make money that way. So she said, I feel badly that we're doing this, and I want to make up for it. And she says, I want you to continue to send me the papers. She said, but when you send me the paper, send me 10 rolls of toilet paper, which we did. So we sent the paper 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, and we sent 50 rolls of toilet paper, which was 200 rolls, 200 rolls a month, or 2,400 rolls in a year. And this went on for a few years. And we used to imagine what a house must look like. She's got all these rooms, but they're all filled up with toilet paper, because nobody can use that amount of toilet paper. But she was. Then we had another customer, Kane Miller, and they were a Fortune 500 company, and both brothers, and they lived in mansions also. And Mrs. Kane one night called me for an order, and she said, can you deliver it? And I said, well, it's late. The driver has gone home for the night, but I'd be happy to deliver it to you on the way home. Oh, she says, oh, thanks, Bob. Well, I get to the door, and she comes to the door in a gown, a wedding gown. And she said, come on in, Bob. She's a good customer, I'm not going to say no. And she said, we just had a new dance floor put in, in the lower level, and I wanted to show it to you. And it was a beautiful dance floor. And she said, can we do one dance? I said, what dance do you want? And all of a sudden I hear the Blue Tango comes on. And we're dancing around, and proper dancing is if you dance counterclockwise around the dance floor. So nobody bumps into each other that way. That's the way they teach you in the dance studio. And in the middle of the dance, what happens? Mr. Kane opens the front door and comes in. And I'll never forget what he told me. He looked me right in the eye and he said, Bob, I want to tell you one thing. As soon as you finish this dance, please leave. And he was serious. And they were good customers. I ran out of that house as quick as I can. One story I forgot to tell is that woman who was taking 30 hours of dance lessons a week. She decided that her husband needed to take dance lessons. And he also was an OBGYN doctor, but the most difficult student we ever had, and he came for lessons. But in all the years, we never had anybody who couldn't get better. And everybody did get better. But what we had to do for him, we made a template of his left and the right foot, and we made 200 of each. And what we did is we pasted him to the dance floor. So all he had to do was go from one step to the next step, until he got around the room. And after a few weeks, he was able to do it with that, and we took the templates away, and he never became a Fred Astaire, but it was sufficient, and it worked for him. We also had a service on Friday we would send to the bank for a few $1,000s because the customers didn't want to go to the bank on the weekends or it was closed and they wanted cash. So we would have the cash on hand, so if they wanted to write a check for a couple of $100s, we would give them the money and have the money. And they were grateful for that service. And I told all the help, I said, unless you recognize the person and know them by name, don't cash a check unless you ask one of the pharmacists who was working. Well, somehow the cosmetician at the time saw this man come in, gave her a check, and she didn't ask me. And the check came back, $50 the following week. And I called her and she said, oh, I remember, he was a good-looking man, so I cashed the check. Yeah, I said, well, here it is. And he had the nerve to sign the check where his signature goes. He signed U period, R period, stuck, instead of his name. You are stuck. And she still cashed the check. And we were out $50. Our store was in a building. We were on the ground level with other stores, and there was apartments on top. And what would happen, across the street was the New Rochelle High School. And in October, the rodents that were by the lake, who stayed by the lake, were looking for a winter home. And where would they came? They came into my cellar. And they used to come up into the store during the night, and they started breaking into the 5-cent candy bars. Well, of course they're doing business, you didn't say anything. But then all of a sudden, the mice would come up and they would go into the Whitman samplers or Russell Stover pound boxes, and we said, this is not working. So what we did is we bought an extra supply of X-Lax, which the laxative, and it was chocolate. And we put it in the cellar, and a lot of them ate, they didn't know what, take 1 or 2 pills, and they ate as much as they can, and unfortunately a lot of it didn't make it. They ended up on the floor dead. But it didn't solve the problem. So what we did is we said, we're going to solve the problem. We're going to go to the pound and we're going to get ourselves a cat, a mouser. And we did. And we put the cat in the cellar, and after 2 nights, we never saw another rodent in the store. And I said to my partner, this is terrific. And my partner was trying to get the cat and throw it up in the air and see if he can get it to land where it didn't land on its front paws. And I said, why would you do something like that? The cat saved us, I said, we should reward the cat. And I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do to my partner. I said, I'm going to take this cat home, and for 364 days a year, he's going to live a life of luxury. Then he's going to come to work for 2 days a year, go in the cellar, then he's going back for the life of luxury. And that lasted for 10 years. And it solved our problem. So there was an answer for it. We were across the street from the high school, as I have mentioned, and there was a fire that one of the students had set, and he burnt the school down. And this guy was a senior, and they were debating whether to give the student a diploma or not. And they ended up giving a diploma to him. And a number of years later, he was caught in some felony and sent away to jail. But they never solved the problem while he was in high school, and it acted up and was a big problem for him when he was 25 years old. Oh, this is a good one. We had a robbery one night, and we had a big safe where we kept drugs and we kept cash. And they couldn't open up the safe. So what they did is they got some rollers and they put the safe on the rollers and they rolled it out the back door. Unfortunately, one of my customers, this was at 3 o'clock in the morning, noticed them doing that. And the next morning I said, well, did you call the police? She says, no, I was waiting for the morning to tell you. This is the kind of one of the customers that I had. One Sunday, we were selling newspapers, and a man came in, a customer of mine, and he bought the Times and the News. And he put $1 down, and all of a sudden, he started turning ashen gray. And he started to fall. And I ran out from behind the counter and caught him before he hit his head on the ground. And I rested him in a supine position. I ran to the back of the store. I got a couple of nitroglycerin. I put it under his tongue, and I called 911. And I wondered what happened to him. I didn't see him for 5 or 6 weeks. Well, about 6 weeks later, he came in the store, looked fine. And I'll say, Mr. Jones says, how you feeling? I'm fine. He said, I've got a problem, though. I said, what's that? He said, remember when I was in 5 or 6 weeks ago? I think I paid you $1 for the papers, but I never got the papers. I saved the guy's life, and all he's worrying about is $1, for the papers. But that was part of the service. Oh, then lessons in humility. Another customer called up after the driver had gone home, and I said, I'll drop it off to you on the way home. And I get to the house, and she says, oh, thank you, Bob. So nice of you to drop the order off. I really need the medicine. She said, can you do me another favor? I said, sure. And she goes inside and brings up a big bag of garbage. And she says, can you take this, and when you get to a garbage pail, throw it away for me? I'm doing here a favor, and all I get in return is garbage, I said, well, a lesson in humility. It happened one more time to a different customer, and I delivered an order, and the woman came to the door, and she said to me, do I have to take the medicine? I said, well, if you don't want it, you don't have to take it. I said, why do you ask? She said, it was for my husband, and he passed away 15 minutes ago. He had a heart attack. So I said, you certainly don't have to take it. I took it back. But, all kinds of experiences. Oh, here's a good one. How am I doing in time? Oh, yeah, let's see. Show some pictures. You can show one right after another. Oh, this. Anybody know what this is? Well, I'll tell you what it is. I discovered it a couple of weeks ago when I was going through my papers. There are 2 things that a teenage boy must have. And this is one of them. This is my draft card. When you're 18, the day you're 18, you run to the draft board because you want to prove that you're 18 so you can get alcohol. And the other thing is, when you're 16, you want to run to the Motor Vehicle Bureau because you want to get your driver's permit. So this is when I was 18, and I got my draft card, which I showed. Next picture. This is a picture of Judy and myself in the pharmacy. Judy used to help out with cosmetics, and Judy's main job is, when you go to the doctor, you're in the big room for an hour waiting, and then they take you inside to the small room, and you spend another half hour waiting. So you wait at the doctor's for an hour and a half. But when you come to the pharmacy, you don't want to wait 5 minutes. You want your prescription right away. So Judy's job was to talk to the people, keep them busy while we rushed to make the prescription. I said, talk about anything, but just get their mind off. And we finished the prescription, and they were happy and didn't waste any time in the pharmacy. Next picture. On my 35th birthday, and I was at Fred Astaire teaching then, I said, what am I going to do with my 35th? So that day I went to the photographer. And that's why they hired me. I was good looking in those days. this is when we went to my son's wedding, and he got married in Jerusalem. And he was living in Jerusalem at that time, and he wanted to get married under the stars. And he said, please come to Jerusalem. And we had gone, and we had also were lucky. We were the 18th millionth visitor to Israel, so they gave us a no-cost tour of the country. We went first class, and when we got to the airport, a big limo pulled up to the tarmac, and I had asked how many pieces of luggage. They said, bring 20 if you want. And we didn't have to go through customs, and we got into the limo, and we got to the hotel, and we're sitting in the limo, and I said, can we get out? They said, not until we roll the red carpet out. And the red carpet was rolled out, and we were in a 10-room suite in one of the big hotels in Jerusalem. And we would go on tours, and when we got to the town, we were on TV, and they would say to us, we didn't have a travel, anybody to show us around. It was always the mayor of the city. He was our tour guide. And we stayed at the best of places and cost us not a penny. And we were the 18th million, and 18 in Hebrew means chai, and it's an important number. So 18 million. But don't you think all my friends had said to us, if we didn't go the year before, you wouldn't have been 18 million, which I guess is right, so you owe us a favor. Any other pictures? This resembles one of the cats that we have here, and I've tried to show the people that it's better to have cats than rodents. And since we have the cats now in the 3 and the 5 building, there are no more rodents, The only thing is I make sure when I feed them early in the morning, and I wait until they finish eating because I don't want to leave any food around for raccoons if they show up. And so I stay about 20 minutes. They finish eating, and this morning they had boar's head roast beef a pound, $15 a pound. I remember going to Publix, and I ordered the roast beef, and she said, do you want to try a sample, like they do in Publix? I said, no, it's not for me, it's for the cats. She said, you're buying a pound of boar's head roast beef for the cats? She said, your cats eat better than I do. So I named the cats. I had to figure a name, and the names I discovered was Tide and Point. I thought that would make everything, and it's worked out. The reason I got the job, I had met some woman who lived on Spruce Court here, and she was getting older in age, and she said, I'm going into the care center, and I won't be able to take care of the cats anymore because I can't come from the care center here every morning. And she said, can you take the care of the cats for me? And I said, I'll do it for you. I said, how long do you want me to do it? And she said, can you do it for 20 years? Well, I was so complimented that she thinks that I'm going to be here in 20 years, I couldn't say no. I got 16 and a half years to go. Well, when we sold the store, it was a letdown for myself because personally I felt comfortable knowing if I was sick or anything, I was around all the medicines and they're all available to me and I can make myself better. Now I was just like everybody else. I'm when I go into a pharmacy, I'm a customer anymore. I'm not an owner, so I need a prescription like everybody else. But then we finally sold the store, and at the time, the independent stores were going out of business because of the insurance companies. And I remember we sold to CVS, and we sold it just for the inventory. Usually you would get a few $100,000 just for goodwill, but that was out the door now. I remember And when you had controlled drugs or narcotics, that could not be transferred. That had to be destroyed. And the FDA, what they did is they sent a representative to the store, and he would physically destroy the merchandise. Well, while he was doing that and his back was turned, I grabbed a vial of morphine, a 30 cc vial of morphine, and I said, this is my long-term health plan. If I get terminal, I know how to end it quickly. Fortunately or unfortunately, after about 10 years, the morphine started to break apart, and the medication was no good anymore. So I had to think of a new solution if I have to end it quickly. But we're still here. I just wanted to tell you quickly about some changes from the last 40 or 50 years that have happened in pharmacy. Years ago, when a woman became pregnant, the first thing an obstetrician would do was put her on amphetamines, because he wanted to make sure that she didn't gain weight. And one of the ways to do that was amphetamines. They would keep your weight down. They didn't recognize the harmful effects of amphetamines in those days. And a lot of people it was a habit that was developed because they didn't exercise good judgment. But one thing that they never allowed was to have an antibiotic at the same time with a steroid. That was never prescribed together. So they were always separately, never together. Today it's routine to prescribe antibiotics and steroids at the same time. Men who had prostate problems, the last thing we'd want to do is give them testosterone. That was like throwing, oil on the fire. Now it's routinely used. In those days, blood pressure was normal. They would add 100 plus your age. So if you were 85 years old and you had a blood pressure of 185 systolic, that was fine. That was acceptable. Cholesterol's in the 250, 275 range, that was acceptable also. Pharmacists today are getting burnout because now working for chains, they're expected to do a minimum of 300 prescriptions a day. And it's a lot of pressure because not only are they making prescriptions, but they're also giving instructions to the patients on detailing on side effects, what the medication's used for. And now on top of it, there's 20 or so injectables that they have to go, and they're giving COVID injections, and for 20 other problems that people have, shingles, etc., all these different shots. So the burnout rate is high today. Just one more story. I went to Hilton Head Hospital, and there was a job opening, and the chief pharmacist said to me, well, what's your salary demands? And I said, I would like to work 40 hours a week, and my demand is 0. He said, you don't want to get paid? I said, no, it's a voluntary hospital at the time. I said, but what I would like you to do is I'd like you maybe an hour or two a week for maybe 3 or 4 weeks to teach me how to make injectables, IV solutions, different drug combinations, chemotherapy, which we don't do at the retail level. And he said, fine. And they loved me there because I was an old-time pharmacist at the time. They did a lot of compounding, and I had lots of experience in compounding. And this went on for about 5 weeks, and never did he give me 5 minutes of instructions. And the 6th week, I never showed up. And he called me and he said, what's the matter? I said, we had a deal. I said, I was saving you over $100,000 a year, and you didn't give me a minute. Well, I'm busy. I said, well, now I'm busy. And to this day, I see this fella. He's working in Memorial Hospital now in Savannah. And he said, in your life, you do dumb things. He said, that was one of the dumbest things I ever did. And every time I see him, every once in a while, he tells me the same story. Well, last story. We got 2 minutes left. I came here when I was 80. And I said to myself, what can I do in life now that I haven't done before? And my wife said, well, why don't you go for a psychoanalysis? I said, good idea. So I found a psychoanalyst, made an appointment, went there, spent 2 hours talking. And I asked her, well, how many sessions will it take to get me back on track? And she said, well, I think you're okay the way you are. So I was so happy, I ran home and I told my wife, she said, I'm fine. You know what my wife said? Find yourself another psychoanalyst. 6 o'clock, folks. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Bob. That was terrific. I'm sure that you also have a life story to tell. And please come see me. Next month we have Mary Lubeck. Mary Lubeck is going to give her life story, and it's going to be some songs and some singers of her songs. So it's going to be a little entertaining and also her life story. So that will be the second Monday of the month in July. I hope to see you then. And again, thanks, Bob.
Thank you.